Picture this. It's 49 million years ago, and you're swimming in what is now the Persian Gulf. You look up and spy a whale just like today breaching the water surface, except that one doesn't quite look right. It has 4 legs, kind of. See, whales evolved from land mammals, and this particular ancient whale is an early step in that evolutionary transition. Today we're talking about the first 4-legged whale ancestor, or at least one of them. Stick around to find out what it looked like and how it helped pave the way for the fully aquatic whales we know and love today. The evolution of whales is a long and complicated story, and scientists are still putting the pieces of the puzzle together. In fact, there are so many different theories that the online community has come up with their own whimsical names for some of the potential ancestral creatures, like Uncle Canoe, which refers to a group of animals called Anthracotheres, or Big Red, which could be a type of hippopotamus. But today, we're talking about a creature that paleontologists have actually found fossil evidence for. They named it Pakicetus. And if you think that name sounds familiar, you might be on to something. That's because the name Pakicetus comes from the Greek word for hilly, referring to the hilly region where the fossils were found in Pakistan. Now, the fossils of this weird mammal were first discovered in 1951, but it wasn't until 2001 that researchers had enough skeletal material to put together a pretty good picture of what it looked like. According to Smithsonian Magazine, it was about the size of a fox, standing just over 3 feet tall at the shoulder, with a head and body length of around 7 feet. So yeah, maybe not exactly what you pictured when you thought of an ancient whale monster, but hear me out. It did have some distinctly wolf-like features, including pointed ears, a long muzzle, and big canines. Those canines weren't for show either. They were hooked for catching prey just like a wolf's. Plus, it had a short tail with a furry underside, kind of like a raccoon's, which would have made it look pretty cute if foxes hadn't already cornered the market on that. But this creature wasn't just some weird wolf-like fox. It also had characteristics that hinted at its aquatic future. For one, it had webbed feet with paddle-shaped toes, which would have helped it steer itself through the water. And unlike modern wolves, which have relatively straight legs, this animal's legs were bowed just like a modern whale's. Which makes sense, since being able to support your weight on land is much easier when your legs aren't bent like that. But there was also another anatomical feature that seemed totally weird. Pakicetus had a small but distinctly whale-like inner ear bone. Now you may be thinking, great, another weird thing about this weird animal. But really, this one feature gives us a window into how sound works in both our ears and the ears of all cetaceans, which include whales and dolphins. We'll tell you how right after. Okay, but first, even though we've talked about a lot of weird ancient animals here, none of them seem weirder than Smilodon, aka the saber-tooth cat. This fearsome predator lived in North and South America during the Pleistocene epoch, which lasted from around 2.6 million to 11,700 years ago. And its scientific name actually consists of 2 parts. The genus name, Smilodon, means knife tooth. And it really does have knife-like teeth, each measuring around 7 inches long. These teeth were curved like scimitars and were perfect for slashing at an opponent. The species name, fatalis, just means of fate. Together, they make Smilodon fatalis, the saber-tooth cat you never wanted to meet. In the past, Smilodons were thought to have gone extinct alongside other megafauna at the end of the last ice age. But according to a new study published in Quaternary Science Reviews, Smilodons may have lived on in South America until much more recently. Using new data from the ice core record, the researchers were able to determine that the timing of the extinction of Smilodon and other large mammals varied across the continent. While these animals were disappearing from North America around 11,000 years ago, they persisted in southern South America until around 8,000 years ago, a time when humans had still not reached the southern tip of the continent. The researchers believe that people may have hunted Smilodon directly or indirectly by overhunting their prey. Either way, this study paints a clearer picture of how these iconic cats went extinct, or did they? One Smilodon specimen collected in 1896 from a cave in Kentucky was dated to around 11,000 years ago. But according to the new study, this dating must have been off, as the ice core record shows that Smilodons should have been gone by then. What's more, the researchers say that the Smilodon skeleton may have been mixed up with other fossils from the same geological period, but found at a different site. Basically, that saber-tooth cat may have died out earlier than we thought, at least in North America. Now back to our weirdly cute, wolf-like semi-aquatic mammal, the Pakicetus. If you're paying attention, you might have noticed that I left out one of the most important things about whales, namely, their lack of legs. So how does this creature fit into the bigger whale family tree? Well, as we mentioned before, it had those weird bowed legs, which are definitely more like whale legs than wolf legs, but it also had 5 toes on each front foot and 4 toes on each back foot, along with a 5th toe on each side of its pelvis. Those back feet would have looked a bit like paddles, while the front feet would have looked more like hands. In 2009, a researcher proposed that these extra toes might have actually been fused together in more aquatic, ancient whales, giving rise to the modern whale's hand with 4 fingers. But other researchers disagree. In 2011, they came up with a different idea. They said that instead of evolving from 5-toed ancestors, whales may have actually lost their 5th toe sometime after they split from other mammals, but before they took to the seas full time. They argued that it's more likely that you would lose a toe while adapting to an aquatic environment than you would gain one. After all, reducing the number of toes would mean less webbing to drag through the water, making swimming easier. But they admitted that without any transitional fossils, we can't really prove either theory. So what about that small inner ear bone? Isn't that kind of hard to explain if the Pakicetus really was a wolf-like animal? Well, see, there's this. Mammals have 3 tiny bones in their middle ear that help us hear by transmitting sound vibrations. And those bones, the malleus, incus, and stapes, all come from modified skeletal elements that were once part of our jaw. In other words, they are basically the only parts of our skeletons that used to be part of our skulls and don't move in the same way anymore. And if you look closely at a diagram of a whale's ear, you'll see that they also have those 3 bones, just like us. Interestingly, the structure looks a lot like the inner ear of a wolf, except that the incus, or middle ear bone, is shaped more like a spool than a hammer, and that little spool is exactly what the Pakicetus had. Plus, the shape of the stapes, or stirrup bone, looks kind of like a bird's, even though modern whales, and birds clearly inherited their similar-shaped stirrup bones from a common ancestor. So having a tiny hammer-shaped bone isn't unique to whales. But what's fascinating is that scientists haven't been able to figure out how exactly that bone got from this ancestral form to the modern whale form. We know that the Pakicetus had that small hammer-shaped bone, but the next closest relative of whales, a group of animals called artiodactyls, which includes deer and cows, have hammer-shaped bones just like the rest of us. And yet artiodactyls don't share any other obvious features with whales. So it's hard to pinpoint exactly how the whales split off from the larger group. Some researchers hypothesize that there was a population of artiodactyls, maybe something like an ancient cow, that chose violence and became aquatic, eventually becoming whales. But others argue that whales and artiodactyls actually share a recent common ancestor that gave rise to both groups, meaning that the ancestral population that led to whales split off before artiodactyls had a chance to evolve into cows. And no matter which scenario is true, we do not know why that ancient creature decided to abandon life on land for a life in the sea. Was it because of rising sea levels? Were resources on land getting scarce? Or did they just decide they liked swimming too much? Maybe one day we'll find out. As for the Pakicetus, we do know that it didn't evolve into modern whales. According to Smithsonian Magazine, genetic studies suggest that it was about as closely related to whales as a raccoon is to a bear. But who knows? Maybe it was just a brief moment in the sun. Life on Earth is complicated and ever-changing, and we can never be sure how the story will go. Thanks for watching this episode. If you want to learn more about whales, check out the link in the description for a neat online exhibit from the Smithsonian.